president, of course, says that he was taken out of context, that he also said nice things about Meghan Markle. But as you can see, Kimberly, the president not keeping his opinions to himself, showing that this trip is sure to be full of more controversial statements from the president.
Yes, and pretty controversial, but right now things are going pretty smooth. What was it like, the scene to see President Trump meeting the Queen this morning, since you were there?
Yeah, Kimberly, there are those side controversies, but here it is a festive mood. With Buckingham Palace behind me, the president came here landing in Marine One in the gardens here. He was greeted by the Queen there, and the president and the First Lady really seemed to be enjoying themselves, and all of the ceremonies here seemed to go off without a hitch. There was an 82 gun salute. There was that formal welcome ceremony. And then, of course, the most interesting things really happening behind closed doors when the president went inside Buckingham Palace for a private lunch with the Queen.
And just so you can give us the information, what are the highlights for the rest of the time that he's there today and the next couple of days? All right, so we just lost Jordan Phelps there, but we appreciate you joining us. And so we're going to move on, guys. If this is not startling, I don't know what is. There have been 154 days in this year so far, and there have been 150 mass shootings, if you can even process that. And another horrific shooting in this country over the weekend. 12 people dead after a gunman attacked former colleagues at a Virginia Beach government office building. Officials say the suspect resigned by email hours before the shooting. So I want to bring in Stephanie Ramos, who is live outside of a memorial in front of the police department with more. Stephanie, what do we know about how this went down and what a possible motive may have been?
Right, Kimberly, we've been here for the last couple of days here in Virginia Beach, and that's something authorities are still trying to figure out. Why did this gunman walk into the city building where he had worked for the last 15 years and just open fire? But I can tell you, this community, families that we have met with, they are grieving the loss of those 12 individuals who lost their lives. It was Friday. They were ready to wrap up their work week, their Friday. They had plans for the future, ready to go home, see their families, all before that gunman walked in and opened fire. But here in front of the Virginia Police Department, you can see there is a growing memorial. And this is what we've seen over the weekend. The community really coming together to comfort one another during this horrendous time. But it is a beautiful memorial here. You can see flowers have been placed, teddy bears, candles. There's also a cross for each of the victims, the 11 city workers and 1 contractor. So I also want to point out that the shooting actually took place not too far from here. It was just about 200 yards. Police say the proximity to the shooting scene really helped get them there quickly. And for right now, we can tell you federal investigators, as I mentioned, are still trying to figure out what drove the gunman to open fire. We do know, as you mentioned, that he had resigned just a few hours before the shooting happened. And again, this community just trying to have it all sink in, just grieving throughout this process. But I did speak with one of the survivors, Christy Duar. She was in the building when the shooting happened. She has worked here for the last 12 years, and she told us the heroic story of Keith Cox, one of the victims, and she says that he saved her life, but the life of other colleagues as well.
We were going to go out to the break room, and Keith was standing there, and he said, "Stop. Stop, don't move. Get against the wall. Be silent as much as possible. Press yourself against the wall and stay quiet." He said, I'll tell you what to do. And he kept on peering out the window. There's a small window in the door. We don't know what he saw, but he looked at us. He was calm through the whole thing, and he said, "Ladies, get in the office. We're going to barricade ourselves in." We went in, and I looked, and I said, "Keith," and he said, "I got to check on everybody else. Barricade the door."
So Keith has also saved that group of 7 by telling them to go into that office and barricade the door and stay in there as he went to check on others, as you heard from Christy. His brother posting on Facebook how much he'll miss his baby brother, his singing voice at home, at church, and that he'll miss his caring soul. And we've learned so much more over the last couple of days about these victims. Tara Gallagher, for instance, was a young mom. She had a 21-month-old baby boy. Mary Louise Gale, another one of the victims, she had planned a trip in the next 2 weeks to visit Portland to receive a national award, but also celebrate her birthday with her 2 children and their families. So we're learning about these victims and how much of an impact this event has had on this city, but all of their lives, all 12 lives, taken by another senseless act of gun violence. Kimberly?
Yes, Stephanie, that interview was incredibly sad, and I just want to talk about you raced to cover this story in Virginia. What has struck you the most since you are actually there on the ground?
Well, I would say the community's reaction to all of this. This is I spoke with the mayor, on Saturday, and he just mentioned how everyone here is affected by this. Not just those that knew the victims and their families, but somehow everyone here is connected. And I mean, these individuals had been here for most of their lives. They had been here in Virginia Beach and working here for most of them, for several years. So seeing the community come together and support one another throughout this, I mean, this memorial has grown tremendously since Saturday, I can tell you that. But just by speaking with individuals here, residents of Virginia Beach, they say they will support one another and get through this.
All right, Stephanie Ramos there in Virginia Beach. Absolutely devastating, but thanks for joining us with the updates. And speaking of shootings and ongoing crisis in Chicago, 52 people were shot over the weekend, 10 fatally, making it one of the most violent weekends of the year so far. Just last weekend on Memorial Day, 41 people were shot. So these shootings may be gang-related, and in response, the Chicago police is ordering patrols on areas where there could be retaliation. So I want to bring in Alex Perez with more. Alex, this is just outrageous. The city had just said that the violence was decreasing compared to last year, right?
Yeah, Kimberly, outrageous is a good word to describe it. And unfortunately, another good phrase is here we are again. It seems every year when summer months approach, when it starts to get warmer, we start dealing with this spike in violence here in the Chicago area and in urban areas across the country. We see things like this happen. But here in Chicago this weekend, particularly, those numbers were staggering. And the police superintendent was talking about this just a short time ago. And he is really getting the message out there that his team of police officers are out there on the streets trying to get this violence, trying to stop this violence. But the issue is 2 things, he says, repeat offenders and guns. He talked a little bit about what the police department is doing. Let's take a quick listen to what Superintendent Eddie Johnson said just a short time ago.
Weekends like this remind us all of the challenges that we face and that they are complex and profound. Now, I know I can speak for everyone at CPD when I say that we take these shootings seriously, and there's a heightened sense of urgency and care when it comes to gun violence in this city. We're going to continue to do everything in our power to prevent and respond to violence, but really, we can't do this without the support of the communities or a unified criminal justice system that keeps our gun offenders out of our neighborhoods.
So, Kimberly, you heard him there talking, Superintendent Eddie Johnson. One of the things he says is very important is getting guns off the streets and tougher gun legislation. The superintendent has been an advocate for stronger gun laws for several years now. He says that's still one of the things that impedes the police department as they try to quell the violence, and also repeat offenders. He says the court system repeatedly allows people who have gun charges out of jail, out back into the streets, and then he's dealing with the same people over and over and over. The superintendent also talked about how a lot of this violence is concentrated in certain areas, certain parts of the city. And unfortunately, the people in those areas, in those quote unquote bad neighborhoods, are the ones that are dealing with all of these problems. And he says he's afraid it's going to be a long summer ahead, but he believes if we're able to get community involvement here, he says he's turning to faith-based organizations as well. And as you may know, we have a new mayor here in this city who says she wants to take a different approach to this. So he's hoping all of that combined in the months to come will help quell and some of this violence. And you said this at the beginning, but it's important to point out again, as staggering as these numbers are, the violence here in Chicago overall right now compared to years past is actually down. And again, also important to point out, it's not only here, it's big cities across the country where they're dealing with problems like this. Kimberly?
All right, Alex, incredibly frustrating and just incredibly tragic, but thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us. And a major shark attack in North Carolina. A 17-year-old teenager was airlifted to a hospital after she was bitten on Sunday. She suffered deep lacerations on her leg, her pelvis, and her hand. So Gio Benitez is live in Atlantic Beach, North Carolina with more. Gio?
I'm here on Atlantic Beach, North Carolina, where a 17-year-old girl was attacked by a shark. Her father jumped in to save her life. Take a look. A 17-year-old girl is recovering from a brutal shark attack in Atlantic Beach, North Carolina.
The whistles were blown, everyone was screaming, and they quickly got everybody out of the water.
Officials telling us the attack happened by Fort Macon State Park Sunday afternoon. The young woman getting deep lacerations to her leg, pelvic, and hand areas. She was immediately flown to the hospital for treatment.
We were able to make access to a 17-year-old female at the beach, and she had severe injuries to her leg and arm. She was airlifted to Vidant Medical Center from there.
This just the latest incident to happen near Atlantic Beach. Last year, a 14-year-old surfer was bitten twice on his leg below the knee. And in 2016, 2 separate attacks, all of the victims surviving.
On any given day, the ocean can be a dangerous atmosphere. It always can be a dangerous environment.
And we're told right now that that 17-year-old is in good condition. And she says that she is still an advocate for marine life. Despite all of this, she hopes everyone respects sharks.
All right, Gio, and we're certainly happy that she is safe. Okay, so I want to check in on the NBA Finals. The Warriors were tying things up. Last night they did in a close game 2, winning 109-104. Golden State is now tied with the Raptors heading into Wednesday's game 3. So I want to bring in ESPN's Brian Windhorst with more. Brian, just to start, the game was exciting, but we got to talk about Obama coming to the game. You were there. What was that like?
Well, he is extraordinarily popular amongst NBA players and NBA fans. And in a tight series like this where there's a lot of tension, the only thing that everybody was cheering for was when he was introduced during the second quarter. Both teams' benches gave him standing ovations. He did a circuit around the locker room area after the game, and it was almost like he was at a campaign rally. That's how popular he is, both in Toronto and with NBA players.
We see Drake there too. President Obama, former president, so much swag. So what did you think of the Warriors' performance? Will the Raptors regret this loss last night?
Yeah, absolutely. For Toronto to be at home, to have a 12-point lead, for Golden State to already be without one of their stars in Kevin Durant. They lost another one of their stars, Klay Thompson, to a hamstring injury in the fourth quarter, and one of their supporting players, a backup center, in the first half. The Raptors missed a great opportunity to take a stranglehold on the series. Now Toronto has lost home court advantage, and it shifts to Oakland for Game 3. The health of those Warriors players is in the air, but the momentum is definitely in the hands of the Warriors.
So what can we expect during Game 3? What do you think will happen during the next matchup?
Yeah, so the big thing is Kevin Durant going to be able to come back after a month away from his calf injury? He has still not been cleared to practice, which has gone way beyond the time frame the team doctors had hoped. They're not going to practice today. They're going to fly 5.5 hours out to the Bay Area. And then Klay Thompson is having an MRI here in Toronto this morning to test to see how much damage is in that hamstring. Then he's going to have to go through treatment for 48 hours to see if he can play in Game 3. So even though the Warriors are going home, their training staff is very busy, and we're probably not going to have answers on the health of those players till much closer to game time on Wednesday night.
All right, and Brian, before we go, are you having a good time? Are you having fun covering this?
You know, the city has been absolutely aglow the last 5-6 days here. The Raptors fans are so passionate, so happy to be here. It's been such a breath of fresh air after 4 years of the same matchups. And Kimberly, looks like we're going to have a competitive series. I think we got a real good chance of going 6 or 7, which even if you don't have a rooting interest, is what you want as a basketball fan.
All right, Brian Windhorst in Toronto right there. Continue to enjoy it, and we'll see you after Game 3.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we move overseas to Italy. An out-of-control cruise ship rammed into a dock. If you look at this footage that we're showing you right there, pretty terrifying. And it rammed into a dock in a tourist boat on a busy Venice canal Sunday morning. 5 people were injured. So I want to go to David Wright in London with more in Venice. David, why wasn't the ship
I was going to say London.
Yes. Why wasn't the ship able to stop?
The ship wasn't able to stop because it was being guided in by tugboats, and one of the steel cables attaching it to the tugboat snapped. Let me set the scene for you here. This is one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world. The Doge's Palace here, the Bridge of Sighs, St. Mark's Square, and right over here is where the cruise ships come in, towering over the rest of Venice. 2,500 people on board this ship. It comes right in along this waterway here, and where it splits, the Grand Canal one way and the Giudecca Canal the other. It went down the Giudecca Canal, being tugged by these 2 tugboats. The steel cable snapped and the ship was out of control, but the waterways are narrow enough that it's tough to stop a 900-foot long luxury liner before it smashes into the other side. This one you could see when we were closer a little bit this morning, where it dragged along the cement of the dock for 100 yards or so before finally smashing into that riverboat. And if it hadn't dragged along the dock, it could easily have plowed into some of the buildings here. So this was the ocean liner equivalent of a fender bender, serious stuff. But the thankful part is that it wasn't much, much worse.
Yeah, thankfully. And I did mention that 5 people were injured. Are they okay?
They've suffered minor injuries. These were mostly people who were on board the riverboat. They saw the cruise ship bearing down on them, the horns blaring. But these were elderly tourists, and they struggled to get out of the way in time before that boat made landfall. Some of them simply slipped and fell. But a nerve-rattling experience, to be sure, and one that people here in Venice are concerned about the bigger picture. Already, this is a city that's overrun by tourists. If we walk just a little bit down that way, the piazza is full of people, and it's that way all summer long. These cruise boats, cruise ships bring in 2,500 tourists at a time, flooding an already flooded city, and there's been a lot of concern about whether it's really safe to have them here.
And David, before you go, I'm just curious if there's going to be any restrictions on cruise ships after this incident.
Seem to have lost.
All right. Thank you, David Wright. Lost David there. Guys, so we're going to move on. The 73rd Annual Tony Awards are coming up on June 9th. Well ahead of the ceremony, I've had a chance to start checking out some of the Tony-nominated Broadway shows, including The Prom, which is quite literally the funniest musical I've ever seen. But underneath the humor of this show, there's a beautiful story about love, compassion, empathy, and acceptance for everyone. And one of the main stars, Brooks Ashmanskas, joined me on set. Take a look. So I saw the show last night.
Yes.
You are an absolute genius.
Oh.
You really are a genius. You really are.
Thank you.
I could give a summary of the show, but I want you to tell everyone what the story is.
Okay, well, basically it opens with 2 Broadway stars who have just opened in a new musical based on the life of Eleanor Roosevelt.
Yes.
Which is surprisingly a huge bomb. And they're at the opening night party and they get the reviews and they're ruined and they're going to close. So they're ruined and they meet at the party 2 of their friends, a chorus girl and someone they've worked with before but has sort of fallen on hard times and is now catering that party, and their press agent, to sort of try to figure out how to salvage their careers. And in a very still selfish way, they find this story about this young high school girl who wants to take her girlfriend to the prom, and when the PTA finds out about it, they cancel the whole prom. And they're all up in arms about it. And they want to go down there and save the day.
Yeah, it's an amazing finish. And you play Barry Glickman.
Yes.
Quite the diva.
Yes.
Quite the character. But the story, this character is based on you. How do you prepare for a role based on yourself?
It is sort of based on me. It's certainly been formed around me, but it's and all of the characters.
And you didn't have to audition, right?
I didn't. Yes, the Casey Nicola, our director, choreographer, had approached me and all of us, the older people.
I see you, Brooks.
Yeah, and so it doesn't always happen that way. It's a really nice way. It's a luxury way of getting a job.
So the story has a lot of different themes that you guys touch on. You touch on everything. It's classic, but it's modern.
Yes.
And obviously one of the themes is, as you mentioned, about this lesbian girl who
Yes.
wants to take her girlfriend. Difficult for her girlfriend to come out and tell her mother. I'm curious what your own coming out story and experience was like and how that played into this.
I was fortunate in that I had, my parents were fantastic people, and so there was no problem with it. I think they, like even the mother in this, I see my parents in her in a way, in that she just wants her child to, and she says, I just don't want you to have a hard life. And I can even hear my own mother saying that to me in one way or another.
Everyone needs to see it. And before we wrap this up, obviously you are nominated again for a Tony.
Yeah.
In fact, everyone that's working on this show has some sort of Tony attached to their name. But anyway, you're nominated again. Who did you tell first when you were nominated, and what do you think about this coming up for this show?
Well, I was with my boyfriend, who I've been with forever, the poor thing. And so it's early in the morning, and I had, like an elderly person, I had woken up a couple hours before that, and just, in my age, it's sort of like, well, I'm up now. And I remembered, of course, that it was coming on, and I was interested to hear what the Tonys had to say, because I really loved this show and was hoping for it. So I'm thrilled about that it was recognized. So I woke him up to say, hey, by the way. And it just means, it means a great deal to me.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen every day. You have to enjoy it, because it doesn't come around every day at all, or at all.
Yeah.
So the fact that, you get nominated for an award like that is very, lovely.
Brooks is amazing, and the show is fantastic. So if you're in New York, you should definitely check it out. All right, my friends, continue to take care of yourselves. And if you're around, stick around for the briefing room at 3:30 p.m. And then you can check out World News Prime at 8 p.m. And if you want to stay updated on all of these headlines, you can go to abcnews.com or download the app. I'm Kimberly Brooks, and I'll see you tomorrow.